Welcome to Unit 12 of EDSE 512. If you look at the course schedule, you'll see that this is the final unit of our class, and we do have only a week to complete this. Congratulations on wrapping up case study part 4 with the intervention plan. My hope is that this was a helpful way for you to finish that case study project. I know that it's been a lot of work and there are many details and various components and parts, so congratulations on reaching this point in our class. You'll notice that the only graded assignment for this week-long unit, Unit 12, is a discussion board. So we'll be going through the module in Canvas here, taking a look at what that will entail. Our focus for Unit 12 is on the implementation of the IEP. We will go over some content related to progress monitoring and just kind of pulling all of this together. So you'll notice as you go through the Unit 11 presentation, there are some best practices and principles for effective educators, such as communication skills, ability to evaluate, and that's that formal and informal assessment, plans and reflects effectively and engages in the professional community. These are just some standards for you to check out, thinking about best practices in the field. This PowerPoint presentation will provide some information on lesson planning, accommodations, the use of technology, as well as progress monitoring. So as you scroll down, you'll just see that the slides address each one of these topics after the other. You've already worked on lesson planning in the case study part 4 project, but we need to talk through in this presentation in a bit more depth the reason that lesson planning is such an important skill for special education teachers as well as general education teachers. As a special education teacher in the field, you might encounter lesson planning if you have your own class, for instance, for a self-contained strategies type class, or if you're working in a team-taught or co-taught class model and you're responsible for some of that collaborative lesson planning, reviewing the objectives and the standards and identifying outcomes and options for formal and informal assessment for students to determine levels of mastery. And then additionally, it's just good to be aware of these processes in general so that you can better partner with general education teachers and providers across settings. This is also related to IEP goals, of course, and that's something that you encountered in the case study part 4 lesson planning process, where you're connecting the plans for lessons that you're developing to the IEP goals that you're working on. So as you go through this presentation, you'll see some emphasis on universal design for learning. Obviously, we want to integrate the idea of multiple modes of expression. We want to offer students content in a variety of ways. Basically, we want to avoid making our lessons and our teaching boring. So anytime that we see that we're getting into a rut or what we're doing doesn't seem to be engaging students effectively, we need to mix it up a little bit. And that could be with the involvement of technology, group work, project-based learning. It could be with the involvement of movement, activities that involve perhaps time outdoors or some other options to engage students in the learning again and to avoid a sit and get kind of a model, although there are many different situations in which we do need to provide information in somewhat of a lecture format, especially when we're hitting high school. If we're in the general education classes, there are still some really great ways to incorporate creativity. And as you scroll down, you'll see information on differentiated instruction, which focuses on what we were just discussing as well. How can we hit on different areas for student need, and how can we develop and implement assignments and assessment processes that play into the strengths and the interests of the students and support them in their growth areas, because obviously every student will always have an area for growth. So we just need to think about where the student stands and what the student needs. Although it sounds a little complicated sometimes, this will honestly make your work more enjoyable as well, because when we see disengagement, we often see behavior within the classroom or exiting of the classroom, problems with attendance or truancy. So by teaching in a really engaged manner and implementing universal design for learning practices and all those evidence-based practices that we've been discussing in our course, you'll actually enjoy your class times more, and students will be learning more and enjoying themselves in the process. This is an IRIS module. You're very familiar with these now. The focus is on providing instructional supports and how we can facilitate mastery of new skills. And this should take you roughly an hour, or perhaps even shorter than that to complete, depending on how quickly you go. So you're encouraged to review that IRIS module. There is a focused little written lecture here on data-based individualization, or DBI. So obviously we're constantly doing this assessment. That would be the formal and informal assessment. The teacher is defining the student problem that requires intervention. So you'll see bullet points down here. So first we need to really figure out what the problem is so that it's clearly defined. We're taking data to determine baseline performance in this area. We're setting a specific goal for the student, and that would be our intervention goal, and then ongoing progress monitoring. Obviously we're collecting data to see what kinds of skill developments we're seeing, or if we're not, why not, so that we can troubleshoot and kind of go back to the drawing board, evaluate which evidence-based practices or instructional strategies we may not have yet incorporated, and see what might be most effective for the student. And if you've been noticing in our previous case study assignments and our general studies of the IEP in this course, these bullet points are actually quite similar to the process that we use for the IEP, which is conducting an evaluation, following that golden thread through needs, drive goals, drive services. So the results of the evaluation would help us to define the problem. Where are we seeing deficiency or areas of difficulty, places where we need to grow? Baseline performance, that's required anytime we generate an IEP goal. And then obviously the intervention goal would be the concept of the IEP goal. And the ongoing progress monitoring is required for data so that we can develop strong and accurate progress reports regarding growth over time for each goal that is listed in the IEP. So this DBI concept obviously is in alignment with best practices in the IEP process, but can be used for students across settings. So there's another IRIS module focused on DBI, and then there is some reading here for you, PDF format. You'll notice that there are 2 PDFs for you to review regarding progress monitoring. Progress monitoring is a great skill to have. And this article does address fidelity of implementation and the effectiveness of our interventions. So it's a good read. It's just a couple years old. And honestly, progress monitoring is one of the most important parts of the job of a special education teacher. Because if what we're doing isn't working, or we're not seeing the growth that we want to see, we really do need to examine our practice and adjust. If what we're doing is working, that's encouraging, and we can continue to track that to see how we might adjust or even up the goal to continue to facilitate student growth. So this really is our compass. It kind of gives us a temperature. It shows us how we're doing and how the child is progressing. And if it's not working, it helps us to understand why, because we can then troubleshoot. So check out those articles. A couple links here for you. Here's the tool chart for progress monitoring, so you can look at many different resources. We do have information on reliability and validity. You can choose a grade level or a content area focus, and check out some evidence-based practices, especially if you see this convincing evidence. That's kind of nice. You can go through here, apply the filters, and search. See what kinds of progress monitoring tools you can identify. And we do have some here for academics, as well as similar webpage, which is for behavior. And this is the National Center on Intensive Intervention. So those are fun to browse. And optional resources here as well. Progress monitoring. This is just something you can review to see if it will work for you. So to walk you through how to graph, and you obviously can adjust this based on what is effective in your setting and in your practice, but there is an Excel spreadsheet here that you can look at and kind of change around as needed, just to practice with some of this progress monitoring process. So you can download that in Microsoft Excel format. Open it up, and it'll give you several steps that you can use. There are different tabs here with examples. Sometimes we know that we need to have strong progress monitoring, but we're not sure where to start. There's this article here regarding electronic progress monitoring. And obviously, these days, a lot of the progress monitoring that's done is electronic. Another article regarding technology and progress monitoring. And assistive technology, which is a great focus area regardless of where we stand in the course. As I mentioned, especially with remote learning coming more into play in the past while here, we're seeing electronic progress monitoring very popular thing, especially if there's a shared drive where different providers can access the data, or there might be an IEP system that's utilized and the district may require progress monitoring points and data specifically entered within that system at a certain interval. So for instance, every 4 weeks. So if that's something that's required of you in your setting, obviously you'll want to use it. But if you want to kind of duplicate and have another system for yourself as well, whether that's an Excel spreadsheet or something on a drive so that you can access it from multiple locations and devices, and also so that you can be sure that it's backed up, it's not lost, and that you can quickly and easily share it with other providers and others in your setting for review, especially come IEP time. That can be helpful as well. So just remember, you need to use what works for you. I know some people who really swear by the paper and pen method, and I think that's great as long as you can upload and transfer it into the IEP program and anything else that's required by your setting to provide evidence of data collection and progress monitoring over time. Other resources, these are websites for you. We love Universal Design for Learning. We've been talking about that a little bit earlier when we were addressing lesson planning. So UDL, Universal Design for Learning Guidelines. This is a website for you to explore, just as I was mentioning, the engagement component and how we can allow different options for representation, action, or expression. So these are multiple means or modes for these different parts of learning and how students are showing what they know. Please do browse that. I love that one. Some other resources here: applied special technology and the power of digital games. Here we are on the final discussion board for our course. So you're reflecting, thinking through everything that we've done and what you've learned. And you'll want to answer these questions. First, what are the current challenges and potential solutions related to ethical issues that could affect the IEP process? And that's either the development of the document or the meetings or both. So challenges and potential solutions related to ethical issues. And when we're talking about ethics and special education, you can really focus in on parent-guardian rights, focus in on child rights, least restrictive environment, best practices, free and appropriate public education, reasonable growth, and ensuring access for students. And then professionally, how can you best guide an IEP process that benefits all the team members, and that's particularly benefiting the student. So you are encouraged to find opportunities for contrasting viewpoints. Your colleagues may see things differently than you do, and that's not a bad thing. That's good. You can share any little end of semester thoughts or reflections with your colleagues. Would love to hear your ideas about how all this has gone. Be sure to cite your sources in APA format as usual. And this is it. That's the last assignment for the course. So congratulations. And then you'll see these little clapping hands. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you. I'm so impressed and proud. All of your efforts have been phenomenal this semester. It's been a challenging one. So way to go. I look forward to your input on the discussion and to reviewing your Part 4 submissions.